Before you go to that, I wanted to know, what was your childhood like on station?
How did you yourself overcome that trauma?
How to receive criticism, because oftentimes that is a big hurdle.
Some people are ignorant. Let's just be honest. People behave ignorant.
I can remember growing up, it was more in the Dutch education system. And now we're switched to the English
English
training.
system.
How do you feel about that?
Oh boy.
What do you think is missing, or what do you see Stacia can actually work on?
What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode. Today we have something special for you. But before we get into the episode, I want to ask everyone to subscribe to the channel. At least 76% of you all that watch the channel are not subscribed. So please hit the subscribe button and hit the notification bell so you know when the videos drop each time. Today we have a very special episode. Today we're sitting down with a scholar, a doctor, therapist, a counselor, I would say a professor. Thank you very much. I don't necessarily want to butcher your name because I've been trying for the past few days in order to say it correctly. So you told me just now I can call you JM.
Yes, you may.
Dr. JM.
Yes, you may.
Therefore, but I will let you say your full name yourself. So that I
My name is Jean-Marie.
Jean-Marie.
Nobody actually pronounces it correctly. It's French, so that's why we call it JM. But it's Jean-Marie.
Jean-Marie.
How are you doing?
I'm well, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah.
Thank you for being here, making the time. Even though it's a short visit,
Yeah,
we try to make it possible.
I'm honored to be here. Thank you.
You have a lot of accomplishments. But before we get to that, I kind of want to give a small little story. I knew your mother for a very long time.
Yeah?
However, we are more in close contact now for the last 5 years. And if it's one word that I can embody your mother, is strength.
Oh, yes.
A very, very strong woman. So I would like to know from you, how was it like growing up with your mother?
Oh, wow. First of all, my mother is the absolute most strongest woman I know. So you're very correct in that. Growing up with my mother was very difficult because in our home, my mother set unbelievably high standards. And as a child, it wasn't always easy to meet those standards. And I also did not always understand why my mother set those high standards for me. So my home was a home of structure. There was a time for everything. We woke up at a specific time, usually 5 in the morning. We were raised Seventh-day Adventists, so our days were wake up, there was worship. We had to study our Sabbath school lesson. We had to memorize our verses. My mom checked to make sure that we memorized and we could say our verses. We had to read our stories, read the Bible. There were morning chores. Then it was off to school. And I had 15 minutes to leave from home to school. School was a place where it was about education because my mom always said, especially to me because I was the eldest, you are going places. So you don't have time for skylarking. So I was not a child that played with other children. I was not a child that was invited to parties. And even if I was invited, I never attended. I was a child, my life consisted of home, school, and church. That was my life. But inside our home, in the interaction with my parents, with my mother, our house was a house where I was trained from a very small age to have independent thought. My mother thought it was very important for me to be able to form my opinions, to articulate my opinions, and to write them down. So when other kids were playing outside, I was practicing my handwriting because my mother always said, unclear handwriting is a symbol of unclear thought, which is actually the first thing that I teach in all of my colleges today. Unclear handwriting is a sign of unclear thought. And my mother was absolutely correct. So I developed I have an Instagram page that is, people come and look at that, that is dedicated to my handwriting. I developed a flawless handwriting because my mom taught that. So there was always structure. We had lots of discussions. My mother's encouraged, especially me, to have my opinion. But there was also the golden rule that I could agree or disagree. I could discuss. I could have an opinion. But when my mom said, it's my way or the highway, then the discussion was closed. So I grew up in a very strict home. Lots of structure, lots of discipline. And I think for station standards, very different from most children. I had to read. One of the things I remembered is that my mother doesn't speak Dutch, not a word. Yet when I made my Dutch homework, my mom always corrected it and always knew where the mistakes were. I still don't know up to today how she did that. So yeah, it wasn't easy. It was not easy growing up in a home where the standards were very high, where my mom never accepted anything else but excellence. I could not complain. If I could not do something, there was understanding. But there was no understanding for me when I never achieved excellence. Because my mom always said, from the day you were born, I knew you were a genius. And she was right.
Wow.
100%.
She's 100%.
That is wonderful.
Yeah.
What was it like when would you say that she prepared you well for when you finally had to leave and go and do things on your own?
Oh yes. Like I said, first of all, I was raised Seventh-day Adventist. And one of the powerful things of being raised Seventh-day Adventist is that from a very young age, we are taught to be articulate. So we are taught to have open speaking, to speak in front. We had to go and say our memory verses in the front of the church. We went from choir, so our life was already based on public speaking, memorizing, writing, and stuff like that. But my mom had gotten pregnant when she was very young. She was a teenager. And my mom dreamed, she was an exceptional student, and her dream was to become an accountant in a country where education is not like it is in the Dutch system. So in Dominica, you have to be the best of the best. And in those days, my mom attended school, and she attended school with the nuns, and the nuns wanted to send her to Roseau because people don't know that.
What is Roseau?
Roseau is the capital of Dominica.
Okay.
My mom is an accounting whiz. My mom literally can take a piece of brown paper, because that's what she did, and a piece of charcoal, and my mom would calculate quicker than a calculator or an accountant. She's an accountant whiz. And it's strange because in our family, I have two nephews, and they both have mathematics. And my eldest nephew takes advanced mathematics in college. He's a whiz. And now my little nephew, Shafir, is also a mathematics whiz. So, so accounting, and my mom had a lot of dreams. And because she became a teenage mother, she lost those dreams.
But she gained with you.
And she told me recently, because when I was little, she never told me that, but she recently told me that one of the reasons that I am so independent is because when she was raising me, she had no help. And she said, when I was having this child that was exceptional and I needed help, nobody helped me. And I suffered because of that. And so I taught myself that I would raise my child to be independent. So all my best attributes, my mom taught them to me.
That's all she put into you.
She put them all into me.
Yeah.
Yeah. And for some people, you would say, she lived vicariously through me, which in a certain sense is true, because she always had high hopes for me. But her general thing was she never wanted me to live the life that she had to live.
Yeah.
She never wanted that for any of our siblings.
Yeah.
So if I would be 100% honest, the secret to my success is my mom's exceptional child rearing skills.
Imagine that. Yeah.
When you say about your handwriting,
yes,
you make me analyze myself as well. You say your handwriting is about the way how you write shows if you have an unclear thought. Can you elaborate on that?
It's like this. When your thoughts are clear, and when I say your thoughts are clear, that means when you are articulating a point. Let's say you have to give up. That's a simple thing. Let's say your teacher asks you to write a story about giving a podcast. Yeah. Now, in order to do that, you have to structure, because a story has an introduction, a middle section, and a conclusion. Yeah. Before you can put that on paper, you have to think it through.
Okay.
And so when you think it through, you actually write the story in your brain already. Now, when it's on paper and the arguments don't line up, that means your thoughts don't line up. So that's why because I teach, for example, writing, I teach academic writing, that's how I know that my students' thoughts are unclear. Because when you cannot put the story chronologically or make sense with it on paper, it's because you have not thought it through.
You have not thought it through first before putting it on paper.
And in order to put something on paper, it must first be clear in your mind.
It's true.
Yeah, so when you're writing and it's jumbled or it's a lot of scratching or you wrote something and you can't remember what it, it's because you were going through that thought process.
Yeah. What about, because I looked at your Instagram.
Yeah.
And it's so therapeutic. The way how it writes.
I've heard so.
And then, but my handwriting is not like that.
No.
So I want to know, what's your thought on that? Does it have anything to do with that? Or do you mean okay, as long as you know what you're going to write before putting it on paper, it has to do with the way you write?
Well, listen, my handwriting, like I said, as a child, I cultivated my handwriting because my mom often made me do writing exercises. Mm-hmm. So because she made me do writing exercises on straight lines, I developed a straight handwriting. And as the time progressed, I didn't need the paper anymore because your hand develops muscle memory. Mm-hmm. So that your handwriting doesn't have to be beautiful for it to be a sign of clear thought. Yeah. It must be consistent. Mm-hmm. So if you're writing big letters and small letters, or it's jumbled, then I know your thoughts are
okay.
But I must say, I also, calligraphy is the art of beautiful writing, is one of my passions. Mm-hmm. So in writing, I write pretty, but that's not because my thoughts are pretty.
Yeah. That's why I want.
Yeah, no.
Because I know you have doctors and all of that. Those have terrible handwriting.
Yeah, but doctors have terrible handwriting because their writing is shorthand. It's quick. Yeah. But it pretty doesn't mean that, but
Yeah.
Everybody has their quirks, I guess.
and like going to the Netherlands, for me, when I went to the Netherlands, it's kind of like a big culture shock. Yeah. It's very different culture. Everything is very much different. How was it for you first going to the Netherlands?
Honestly, going to the Netherlands felt like coming home. I've always felt at home in the Netherlands. Because I realized that the mental independence that I had been fostering at home in Statia, in my house, the Netherlands had that.
Already.
So I never experienced the culture shock. It was like, there are lots of people here like me. Yeah. I loved it. Yeah. And I love it still.
When you say there is a lot of people like you, what do you say?
Well, when I was growing up, it wasn't easy. I mean, I was teased mercilessly. I was this skinny little girl with terrible eyesight, which is still so. I wore all glasses.
Yeah.
I was a nerd in all sense. And then I was in church, and I had a strict mom. So the other kids were doing things that I was not allowed to do. But at a very young age, I was intrigued with knowledge. So after a while, I didn't even care. People thought it was, oh, my mom. In the beginning was the strictness of my mom.
Yeah.
But once I discovered the world of intelligence, I lived in the library. So when I was an academic from then, and I was interested in philosophy. I was interested in human psychology. I loved to talk. I couldn't keep my mouth shut. And so when I went to the Netherlands and when I went to college the first time and I talked to professors, there were people who were interested in ideas as well.
As you.
And so that for me, I was like, oh, I could talk for hours with these people. Where in Stacia, I mean, I love my people, but oftentimes people in school would say, oh, so you are genius, you think you're smart? No. You know, nobody really wanted to talk about the things I wanted to talk about. Who 13-year-olds want to talk about the philosophy? So the Netherlands was really, I think that if I personally had went to school in the States, which was actually the first intention, I would not have thrived. The way that I am as a person, the things that I love, the things that I pursue, that fit in perfectly in
with the culture.
Yeah. Oh. My daughters, as a joke, inside joke, my daughters always call me, oh, that's the white lady. The one, because when I speak on the phone, I speak Dutch or whatever. And people always, when I walk into rooms after, it's like, oh, we didn't know you were black.
How you speak.
My daughters, even though they were born in Holland, they always say, Mama, you are more Dutch than we
That
are.
is interesting, how they say they hear you on a voice, but then when they see you in person, they say like, I thought you were different.
Yeah, they always. When I got my first job as a professor, when I had first the interview on the phone, and when I came, and that was a funny thing, the lady said, Mevrouw Schmidt, it's your turn now. So I stood up.
Yeah.
And she looked at me. She said,
Mevrouw Schmidt.
No, not you. Not you. Mevrouw Schmidt.
Yeah.
And then I started to talk, and she was like, oh, I'm sorry. She was like, she apologized. Yeah. And I said, it's fine. I'm Mevrouw Schmidt. Yeah.
Wow.
And you accepted it, or you didn't feel?
Back in those days, the talk of race and discrimination was not as prominent as at this time. And when it comes to race and discrimination, my philosophy is this: you cannot be angry at people for their ignorance. And a lot of discrimination, or things are labeled as discrimination, when often it's not. It's often simply ignorance, as in not knowing. Through the years, of course, you learn to spot discrimination. But it wasn't that she was thinking, oh, you're black, you're not. Bro, I got that job in 5 minutes. But it was because she had heard my voice. And the voice and her experience of black people, because black people in the Netherlands speak Dutch with a heavy accent. Often they do. So that wasn't racist. That was just like, I didn't... but I must say, I haven't encountered a lot of discrimination and racism, those practices, against me personally.
But then can you say that your voice is what represented you? The way you speak?
My voice, but also my intelligence.
Okay.
I have always been the smartest girl in the room. And when I went to college, and there were 350 white girls, and there was just this little small black girl. When I aced, I remember one of the things I'll never forget is that we had an exam and the professor came up and said, nobody passes this exam. It was true. They had abysmal rates. And that time when the exam passed, there were 3 students that had passed. 2 of them were higher years, so they had taken the exam. They had resit. And I was the only student who had passed that exam, and my grade was an 8.5.
Wow.
So I have always been the smartest girl in the room. And that has paved my way in the Netherlands. And what also paved my way is this. My mom always said to me, the color of your skin is going to be a problem to the other person. It's never a problem for you. So I have never let the color of my skin be an issue for me. Yeah. And that changes your experience in the Netherlands. A lot of people of color enter the room with their head down, expecting to be. But I enter the room. So you
enter in a negative?
Yeah, and then you pull that. It's also what you project, you pull in. But I always enter in the room like, hey, this is Jean-Marie, this is JM. You like it? Cool. You don't like it? Cool. but I ain't going nowhere.
Would you say your mother really instilled confidence in you?
Yes.
Because that has to do with your self-esteem
Yes. Between mom and church, between mom and church. Singing in the choir caused you to be up. Because let me tell you something. Seventh-day Adventist people are some of the most critical people ever. So you couldn't go up in the church and sing or recite something and be bad. No, at the end, Director Blake or Director Cherubim will call you up, especially Director Cherubim, Augustine Cherubim. He would be like, "What kind of foolishness was that?" So you were critiqued. Yeah. But my confidence comes from my mom. We learned stuff at home. She caused us to memorize things. Yeah. My place in the world is at the top. Wow. I am excellent. Excellence is my DNA. You are worthy. My mom always said to me, you are a genius. And that's what most people don't know. If you people don't remember anything about me tonight, here's my message. Geniuses are not born. They are created. My mom created, because I had intellectual potential. I have 2 daughters. I'm very proud of them, so I talk about them all the time. Yeah. My youngest daughter has been clinically diagnosed as genius. Oh. And my elder daughter is clinically diagnosed as exceptional. So my children have an exceptional IQ, and they have the potential to learn. But their genius, I created from in the womb. When I found out that I was pregnant, I created a whole program.
I like how you highlight that.
I was to raise my children. So I played classical music. When they were in my womb, I bought this headphone and I had an extra band. And I played classical music for my children. I read philosophy to them. I sang to them. I changed my diet. I did all the things that would nurture them. When they were born, I put them to bed at certain times. I played white noise for them. So my then husband, we cultivated genius in our children. Wow. And then it paid off. Yeah.
That is beautiful. And I like that is really a point that's coming forward more often now, because I'm seeing like different organizations that can speak about that. They're now looking into how was the pregnancy.
Yeah.
Because you have a lot of children coming with different things now. Yeah. So now the question right now is they're asking when you're registering your child, how was the pregnancy?
Yeah. But what people don't know is that a lot of dysfunction or deficiencies in children are created long even before pregnancy.
Taking me back.
There's a book called We Are Our Brain by a doctor. He's called Dick Schwab. And one of the things his research has shown is that your deficiencies in your children, you create them in your youth. Like, for example, a lot of young men start to consume marijuana at the age of 16. Now, young men should not consume marijuana before they are adults. Young people either, because it destroys their brain. It often leads to an inability to produce healthy sperm. It affects their brain. Now imagine all these young men that are consuming marijuana at 16 to 18, and it's nice. And then later on they behave themselves and they marry beautiful women like you, Carla. Not that Jackie was doing that, but they marry beautiful women like you and they start families. But their genetic code has already been altered by their marijuana use. Yeah. And then they pass that on through their children. And their children are often born with deficiencies. And they'll be like, but what happened? So you actually have to prepare yourself for parenthood before you even start to have sex. Let me say that. Yeah.
So
and that's why we look at that.
So what you're saying is it does not only depend on the mother. It also depends on the...
Remember, your children are 50% of the dad, 50% of the mom, and I always say 100% themselves. It's what you put in. But also during pregnancy, what the mom consumes is very important. But what the dad has already, because his packages come pre-packaged. After he's delivered them, it's not like he could change or alter. So what he has brought to the table, of course, can be altered by what you consume. But if he has brought, a few dented packages to the production line, and then you were not eating properly, so your packaging is damaged, then that affects the kids as well.
I find very interesting. Well, interesting to me. How does someone? Because you say that your daughter is. I'm trying to figure. What was the correct word?
They're diagnosed.
How do you go about a process like that?
Yeah. I was gonna ask.
Well, it's actually you need a psychologist for that, and they do a special type of IQ tests.
Were you curious, or was it?
This is actually what happened. When my children were born, I already knew they were different. I mean, I knew what I had been putting in.
Yeah.
But what happened was my youngest, she ran away from school one time. And it started when she was about in the 4th grade. She started complaining about the level of noise in her class. Oh. She started complaining about the teacher was so slow. And she started talking about how the teacher explained things. So she came home and she was like, Mom, this teacher actually thinks I'm a dummy because she's explained. So her intelligence started to manifest, but then she no longer fit in. And one day, the most terrifying thing happened is the school called and they said to us, Molina, because I was married then, your daughter is missing. I was like, what? My daughter is what? She ran away from school. And she ran away from school that day because she was so triggered by what was going on in the classroom and also by a comment that the teacher had made to her. She went first and hid in the bathroom. And when she couldn't quiet the noise in her head, she went walking in the thing. And when I came home, I found her at the step of our house and she was crying. And I asked her, baby, what's wrong? She said, Mama, I cannot sit with those people because those people are not smart.
Yeah.
And I said to her, and how smart are you? She said, Mama, I'm very smart. And I said to her, do you want to find out how smart you are? And she said, yes, Mama. And then we took her to the psychologist, a child psychologist, and she did a series of tests, all sorts of tests. And she insisted that we as a family, so her sister, myself, because she was scared, and my then ex-husband, that the 4 of us were then tested. So we all were tested together and then found out that we were a family of geniuses.
Wow.
Because not only was I a genius, my daughter is a genius, my ex-husband
as well.
The
family of geniuses.
A family of geniuses.
Yeah. Before you go to that, I wanted to know, what was your childhood like on Stacia? Because were you born here?
No, I was born in Dominica. My parents are Dominican. I was brought to Stacia when I was about 4. So I grew up here. What was my childhood like? It was
on Stacia.
It was twofold. There was church. My life centered a lot around the Seventh-day Adventist Church, and that was where I sang in the choir. I was in the Pathfinders. I did all those things. So it was a church thing. But my childhood in Stacia also was a childhood of trauma, because I was abused as a child, and I was sexually abused as a child, and so that too was part of my growing up here.
Sorry to hear that.
Thank you for saying that, but I'm a survivor. So.
Wow.
Wow.
I just was curious to know like what made you connect to Stacia because, of course I'm younger, way younger than you. So I wanted
you guys are
so I'm not really familiar. Okay, about Jean-Marie. Like
no, because
what makes you connected to the island?
When you got you're younger than I am, so I
Yeah.
had left when you came here.
Yeah.
Yeah, but my mom moved here when I was very little, and so I grew up here. I grew up with most of the kids here, the older generation.
Okay. So apologize to bring up your trauma, but have you?
Why would you apologize for bringing up my trauma?
Because I don't want to bring up any triggers. That's why.
Healing
Yeah.
is acknowledging that where you are now is not where you came from, but where you came from does not determine where you are now. So I'm not ashamed of my abuse. I was a victim. I was a child that suffered something that no child should go through. And for the record, many children in my youth were abused on Stacia. That is one of the things that I have always, though I love my community, I've always been very critical of my community because child abuse is rampant in Stacia. It was rampant and it is rampant. And I say this unapologetically. Our community chooses often to close its eyes to the abuse going on of children here. And I think that is highly irresponsible.
Wow.
So,
I'm glad that you shared that.
Yeah, I know, it's not going to fall. And I actually reached to the point where I don't really care anymore because there's too much trauma in this community and too much eye closing. And I feel that we don't call our community to attention when it comes on trauma. And what people don't realize is that trauma is transgenerational. So you pass your trauma on to your children, and your children pass that trauma on to their children. And a lot of children in Stacia, because I meet children on and off, and of course I give therapy to people in Stacia. I have sessions, people talk to me about their experiences, and a lot of people in Stacia have just gone through trauma, and the community has been like, oh well, you know. And also I say this unapologetically, the community has often sheltered the perpetrators and made and accused. One of the things I've hated about this is that sometimes children would be molested, and then you would hear comments like, "Oh, she was too hot," or "She was looking for it," or "What she's doing," or "What she's that." I remember that when I was a little girl, when I remember sitting in church, in the very church where I was raised in, and I listened to a conversation between two adult women. When one woman told the other woman, and she was speaking about me, and she said, "Well, did you hear this and this and this?" And the other woman said, "I didn't really know. I don't think it's true." And then the other one said to her, "Good for her." I remember listening to an adult woman say, "Good for her, because her mouth too big, she too sharp, and this and that." And I was like, wow, you are an adult, and you are saying good that a child is being abused. I never forgot that. I also never spoke to that lady ever again, even though my mom beat me for being rude.
Yeah, at the end of the day, they want you to be respectful and all that.
Yeah.
And you said that trauma is
Transgenerational.
Transgenerational. I don't want to go specifically into the situation, but how did you yourself overcome that trauma?
Well, first of all, I recognized that no one needed to recognize my trauma. Because a lot of times when you go through trauma, you are expecting people to say it happened or it didn't happen, or it's true or it's not true. You need people to recognize that. The first thing is I recognize that what I had experienced as a child, what I felt happened to me, what I knew happened to me, it did happen. I didn't need anybody to say that. That was the first step. The second step was to acknowledge that my trauma was something that had been done to me, and it was not who I was. Because that's often what causes trauma to remain. You start thinking it's something about you. And especially when the community says things like, "Oh, she was too fast," or "She was too fresh," or whatever, you start thinking, "Oh, it's me." So that was it. And the third thing is I sought healing. I sought professional healing. I did a lot of work myself. But when I became older and I was free from many things, I went to therapy. I needed that. And I journaled a lot because I journal every day, still today. My daughter's journal, and even my students' journal. I have everybody journals.
Yeah.
Because, those feelings, they fester.
Yeah.
And a lot of times, that's what causes your trauma to remain. The festered feelings that you don't express, you don't let them out in any way. And what helped me was also realizing that I was not a victim. I am a survivor. I survived trauma, which made me stronger than my aggressor. Yeah. But you choose every day, because I still do that. I choose every day to be a survivor. That's important.
Can you describe the way you journal? You go about journaling.
Okay, so I journal either early in the morning or late at night, because that's when my brain is most free. I'm a free journaler. So some people have journal prompts. They read things, they ask questions. I don't do that. I have, if I knew, I would have brought my journal with me today. I buy a journal. I have many of them, and notebooks. I write on squared notebooks. You would notice that instead of lines. I pre-decorate them because I'm a creative journaler. And what I do is I mark out the dates, and I don't make my entries too long. And I get up in the morning, and after I've done all my things, I pick up my pen, and I just start whatever the feeling is that comes. I start writing, and as I write, I build on that.
Okay.
That's how I journal. That works for me, and it's consistent because I do it at the same time, and I don't do it very long. So because my brain, no one's brain actually can concentrate more than 20 minutes. So I never write longer than that.
Yeah.
And it becomes a routine. But for people who would like to start journaling, it would be nice if you would have like a journal prompt or a 5-minute, and then you build.
Go on that. Yeah. Because I know there are different types of journaling where some persons they write, but they burn it after.
Yeah. There's different types. The journaling is about getting in touch with your feelings. What you do with it after that, some people that I know, they journal simply creatively. So they just use stationery and pictures and stuff like that. I've always been a writer, so I write. Yeah. And my youngest daughter used to journal by drawings. Now she has progressed. Nice. Yeah, that was really nice. Yeah. And now she has progressed to actual writing. My oldest daughter has now ditched journaling because she's like, Mom, I'm starting to be a pilot. I have time to journal. Oh, wow. That's nice. She doesn't journal anymore. No.
I saw you mention that you say that your students sometimes also journal.
All my students journal.
And I know you have this thing you do is called Tough Love.
Yeah, Tough Love. That's my teaching method.
Can you give a little bit more of explanation as to what's that?
When I was in college, when my first year in college, and I have a friend, Eurisha. She always laughs at this story. I'm thinking about it, makes me laugh. Eurisha Blake.
Yeah.
When I came to college in the Netherlands, my first semester, I failed every class. Wow. Oh, my ego was broken. My ego was broken because I was an exceptional student. Yeah. And all of a sudden, I failed all my classes. I remember calling home, crying on the phone, Mommy, I'm a dummy. I can't study. And I remember my mother said, what you crying for? And I told her, and she said, Jean-Marie, you're a genius. Get yourself together. Find the root of the problem and fix it. And she sent me a book. I have it till today, Getting Straight A's in College. Mm-hmm. And Getting Straight A's was written by a Mr. Gordon who went back to college after so many years. And in that book, he talked about how he started to build routines. And so when I decided that I was going to fix the problem, I realized that when, like in Stacia and in Cursa, when I went to school, we were taught to reproduce knowledge. So I was very good at memorizing. I couldn't create knowledge because I had not learned that. I also hadn't really learned proper learning techniques, because back in the primary school and other schools, we didn't have to do that. You didn't have to do much effort and you got a 10.
Yeah.
So I had basically no learning strategies. So when I decided to find out what's wrong, and inspired by his book, I created a program for myself, a structure to get my grades up. And I remember that it was a 2-part thing. I always went to class in the beginning, but I never really paid proper attention. My notes were sloppy, the handwriting and stuff like that. And then I realized that I needed to be tough on myself, and tough as in setting standards. So one of the first things I said is that I will never take a resit. Every exam I pass, I will pass one time. That was a big thing for me.
Yeah.
So I did that. And then the second part was you needed to create a safe space, because you're not always going to get it right. So when I created that structure for myself, I incorporated learning strategies. I started to plan my days, still do those things till today. Made time slots, learned about how the brain works, and all those sorts of things. Created a whole program for myself. And then I went back the second semester. I passed all my resits. And ever since that day, up till this day, because I still take exams now and again, I have never resat an exam.
Yeah.
Wow.
So that learning structure was what got me through college flying colors.
Yeah.
When I was finished, and because I never wanted to be an educator, I never saw my career in education. I was going to be a big-time researcher. I had planned my career elsewhere.
Yeah.
It was one of my professors who, in my 3rd or 4th year in college, I remember I had filled in for another professor who had become sick. And I had done it because I was complaining that I had a schedule and the teacher was sick and blah, blah. And the professor said to me, Schmidt, you have such a big mouth. You go and plan that class.
Yeah.
And I did that class, but only because I wanted to have my structure.
Yeah.
And then when it was over and I was ready to graduate, and I needed a letter of recommendation from him. I can remember his name. His name was Dr. J.J.G.B. de Frankrijker. He wrote a book. And Professor de Frankrijker needed to write me a letter of recommendation for me to enter this program, because it was for the top 2%. And we needed to have a recommendation letter.
Yeah.
And I had been drafted. I was the only black girl drafted, so I was elated. And Professor de Frankrijker said to me, I'm not writing that letter. I was like, dude, you crazy? Did you see my grades? And he said, Jean-Marie, you can be a researcher any day of your life, but have you seen your student evaluations? I said, of course not. I didn't read those stupid things. And when I read the student evaluations, then I was like, who are they talking about? He said, they're talking about you. And then 2 weeks later, I had a job as a professor at Rotterdam University. When I got there, I realized that a lot of my students were struggling. They just couldn't study. Their grades were, And then I said, you know what? I wonder if I use my little college thing.
Yeah.
And I took it out and I started structuring my classes. And then the magic happened. All my students started passing their exams.
Wow.
Nobody missed my lectures. And that time it didn't have a name. But it was when I started to, I had student evaluations, and one student has said, I love Professor Molina because she gives us tough love. And that's when I decided to name my method Tough Love. And it's tough because it sets standards. You cannot succeed if you don't set standards. You have to put in the work, period. There's no shortcuts. So there's no elevator to success. It's stairs. You have to take. That's the tough. And love, because I believed in them. I also told them, you can do it. So there was this nurturing part of being there for them, believing in helping them, but also maintaining the standards. And that's where tough love came from. And I'm very proud of my teaching method because it has been critically acclaimed.
You did it yourself?
did it. I created them as a student.
Yeah.
But the best part about tough love is this. Tough love teaches every student, any student, across every field. So I've tutored doctors, lawyers, chemists. Right now, I'm tutoring about 15 maritime engineers.
Wow.
Tough love doesn't discriminate. I tutor little kids, professors like myself, because professors have to have, their accreditations, and sometimes they don't do that. Ministers of education. It doesn't matter who you are.
Wow.
Tough love teaches everyone.
That's a powerhouse there.
It's a powerhouse. Yeah.
Last night, I came home last night, and I was talking to my wife. I was talking to Paula, and I actually kind of wake her up because she was already kind of going to sleep.
Yeah.
And because of the conversation and how I was talking about
hack your brain.
I really did like the presentation,
Thank
how you
you,
went
thank
about
you.
it. And he was talking about unhack your brain, and a lot of people that live in their comfort zone and stuff like that. I'm curious to know people in the comfort zone. We live on an island. If everyone on the island chooses to live in their comfort zone, what then happens to that particular community?
You tell me. You live in a community where virtually everybody lives in their comfort zone. We always live.
And then you become stagnant, right?
Yeah. You know what happens when you live in your... This is a saying about the comfort zone. It's a beautiful place, but nothing grows there. When you choose to remain in your comfort zone, that means your brain is in a state of sleep. You're a zombie. There's no growth. There's no broadening of your horizons. And if you choose to remain in your comfort zone, your community is not going to change. Things don't change. And one of the things, because I've known to be very critical here, and people say, she's negative. No, I'm not negative. I feel that on Stacia, we don't do enough. We can do better.
Tough
but
love.
we choose not to because we are comfortable. That's a comfort zone thing. We're comfortable with the things that we have. And we say we want progress, but we often don't want to put in the work to achieve progress. And that's why we remain stagnant. So you're going to always hear me saying that a lot of things in our community do not change because we don't want to move across our comfort zone. And our brain is built to keep us there. So therefore, you wouldn't move.
I totally agree with that.
I see you also mentioned he was also talking about reading.
Yeah.
What does reading itself do to your brain?
Reading expands your understanding. Listen, you are made to interact with the world. You interact with the world by, let me say this. Your brain is made up of cells, right? Neurons. Now, every day they are created. You make new ones. So we all have millions and millions and millions of these cells. Now, when they meet each other, and when it's the important part is where we talk about is where the parts of your brain they meet each other and they relay messages, and that's where you grow. Now, if you don't expand your horizons, if you don't cause your brain to know new things, it doesn't make any new, what we call in Dutch, verbinding. It doesn't make any new attachments. So it's like you see how beautiful this room is? If you don't clean it, it's going to get dusty. That's what happens. Reading expands your consciousness. It causes your brain to be exposed to new ideas. And a brain that is exposed to new ideas can no longer live in its predictions, its comfort zone. So then it is forced to grow, forced to move. And that's how you grow. So when you don't read, your brain loses its ability to expand. Do you know that, for example, research has showed us that when we look at the brain, for example, of nuns who spend all day praying, and their brain, the size of their brain, has reduced to almost nothing.
Yeah, because
Why?
it has not
Because it doesn't, and also the brain is very efficient.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What is not used is put away.
Yeah.
You know, so you also see the difference in the sizes of the brain. Makes me remember when I was small, they used to call me about my big forehead, and it is huge. And they used to tease me about it. And my mom used to say at home, tell them in school, your forehead is big because your brain is big.
Yeah.
She was right. It's true. She was right.
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
so reading expands your consciousness. And when a community does not read, its consciousness remains damped. It remains in this small little box. And reading also is a way in which you can show children the world. You know something? Stacia has some exceptional children. And I talk to them sometimes, and they have the most amazing stories. But they're not exposed to the world through reading.
Yeah.
They're always on an iPad, or they're always, at a screen.
Yeah.
And I'm like, but those things don't expand your brain. And I'm like, with the potential to learn here, the library should be the most visited place in the community.
Yeah.
Yes, yet it's not. But parents who don't read cannot cultivate reading in their children. Yeah. So, yeah. And like I said, in our house, and every Adventist person in this island would agree with me, how much reading we had to do.
Yeah.
We had every year in Pathfinders, we had to read books. I remember when I was a little girl, I read Think Big by Dr. Ben Carson. We had to read all those sorts of books, and those things
expands.
Because Ben Carson was a pediatric neurosurgeon.
Yeah.
And Ben Carson is the person who introduced me to the world of neuroscience, because I read that book.
Yeah.
And I used to say when I was small, I'm going to be a pediatric neurosurgeon just like Ben Carson. I ended up becoming an educational neuroscientist.
Yeah.
But he lit that fire within me. Reading is essential to growth. So don't buy your kids so much toys. Buy them books and see them become geniuses.
I'm the genius.
Yeah. Yeah. And tell them they are. Because what you think you are, that's what you are. So tell them they're genius.
Exactly.
Tell them they're smart every day. Tell them they're beautiful. Tell them they can be whatever they want to be. And this is what I gave to my children. You can do anything, but you don't have to do everything.
Wonderful.
I'll write that one down.
I love that one. You mentioned about you have this thing that you do with the college students, with failure,
Yeah.
I watched your TED Talk.
Yes, you did.
How do you train someone to not fear failure, but to succeed?
Well, the first thing I did is I teach people to recognize their motivational patterns. You see, we live in a world where people believe that success is the absence of failure. That's not true. That is not true. And you notice it in everything. We never want to show the sides of ourselves that are not perfect, because that's the narrative that the world sells.
Yeah.
But that narrative is what's keeping us as people stagnant. So first I told them, I tell my students always, success is not the absence of failure. Success is using failure to make yourself better. So I first teach them that failure says nothing about who you are, because that's the message. If you don't do this and this and that, you're a loser. The first message is that failure is ingrained as something's wrong with you.
Yeah.
You see it in schools, for example. Everybody wants their children to go to HAVO or VWO or to go to the highest form. We cannot all be educational neuroscientists. So I often tell children and tell my students, failure tells me that there is a problem in your learning process. And your learning process is not who you are. So that's the biggest change. When they realize that, hey, I can't do this, but that doesn't mean I'm not a good person or something's wrong with me. That's step one. Then I teach them strategies to interpret what failure is actually saying. And failure is actually the way we are genetically, cognitively built to grow. Our brain literally gives off signals when we fail. And those signals are supposed to receive feedback. Yeah. So someone's supposed to point it out to you. Otherwise, your brain doesn't do it by itself. Because that has to be really big for your brain to be like, oh, I need to move. Remember, it wants to keep you lazy. Yeah. So by giving feedback, I show them, like, listen, you see that? That's where you went wrong. And do you know why you went wrong? Because you didn't take the time to do this and that. And it's like, oh, that. And I also teach the third thing, that failure is a message. It's your brain telling you, hey, I need better input. Yeah. So those things together changes. And we're teaching them strategies because people believe that people are not motivated. People are not motivated. People are demotivated. There's a big difference. Yeah. Demotivated means that you have tried something so many times, it doesn't lead to success. And after you've had the experience all the time, your brain tells you, this is never going to work for you. Yeah. This cannot work. So you start believing that it doesn't work. But when you believe it doesn't work, your brain then creates that reality for you. So that's why in our house, we never say we can't. We never tell our kids, I'm not good at writing. Because the moment you tell your brain, I am not good at writing, your brain then changes and creates the reality for you in which not only are you not good in writing, you will never be able to learn it. Yeah. So it's what your brain is literally a muscle. Yeah. You have to train it, but it's very tricky. What you feed it, it's what it holds on to, and if what it holds on to keeps it in its comfort zone, it's going to trap you right there.
Yeah. With your students, you say you have to point out and give them feedback. Yeah. Right? How do you teach, in say it can be a child, an adult, how to receive criticism? Because oftentimes that is a big hurdle.
Yeah, but feedback is not criticism. That's the first lesson we teach. Remember I just said that failure is about your learning process? One of the things that I see in education and that I'm very critical of teachers, I'm very strict on teachers, is that teachers often are the reason their students don't succeed. Because teachers give feedback on the person of a student instead of the process. So,
can you elaborate?
I will. A teacher would say, for example, what stupidness did you just do? Or why did you do that? So teachers often create shame by their emotional reaction to what a student does. Remember, teachers, whether they like it or not, they are parents as well. They educate children.
That's true. Yeah.
So the emotion, because children first learn through emotion. So how you react when a child fails, the emotion is what stores in their mind. So the first thing I do, even when I teach teachers, is I say, before you go and start to say what's wrong, go through the work and identify 5 things that the child did right and give the child a compliment for those 5 things. That's step 1. Step 2, you must critique the process. Not, you don't know this or you did this. No. I noticed there's an error here. The error is this. A lot of teachers mark with red pens and scratch. That's the emotion. You're telling the child they're not good. They store that. You also see in education, a lot of teachers are about, we don't use pen. But what teachers often don't do is they tell you something is wrong, but they don't explain to you why it's wrong. Neither do they give you tips as to how to do it better. And that's a Dutch system thing. So I teach children as well as people that feedback is not only saying that's wrong, it's why it's wrong and how can you fix it. So that's part of feedback as well. Let me see. And the most important thing is I never tell my students they are smart. Because here's what happens when you tell people they are smart. They develop the idea that it's them. And so if I'm smart, I don't have to put in the work. Like people often say to my children or about my children, oh, of course your children are excellent. You're a big professor. They don't have to do that. Or people say to my daughter, oh yeah, you're John Ray's genius daughter. And I said, wait. Mm-mm. In our house, my daughters have to work very hard. Yeah. So when my youngest daughter, for example, she takes Latin and Greek, Chinese, French, English, and Spanish. She takes economic, she takes economy 1, mathematics A, B, C, and D, because she's a mathematics genius. Yeah. She takes chemistry, physics. Baby, if I forgot something, please forget. But my daughter takes, I think, about 14 to 16 subjects. Yeah. And she hates geography and biology. Well, biology not so much anymore, but she hates geography and history because she says, Mom, there's nothing to study there, this and that. She doesn't put effort. So my daughter would get 10s for every subject because 10s is the thing of her life, and she's going to come home with a 6 for geography. And she was like, yeah, Mom. I was like, we work consistently on everything. Yeah. And I don't tell them, though they're geniuses. I mean, of course I tell them, Mom is proud of you. But I don't tell my daughter, oh, you're a genius. No, I said to her, you got to put in the work. And I often tell her, you know what would be a tragedy? That you're a genius and you don't achieve your potential because you're living off the fact that you're a genius. Yeah. What makes you a genius? I ask her. Your brain or your work? My work, Mama. So then why are you not working? Yeah.
That's a good one to put.
Yeah.
You also mentioned about comparing the Netherlands and if you wanted, because I think the first choice you would have liked to go is to the U.S.
No, people wanted me to go to the U.S. Oh, but I felt I would not have thrived there as I've thrived in the Netherlands.
Do you have a reason why?
I'm highly competitive. And the Dutch education system is among the best in the world, and it is way better than the U.S. education system. America doesn't create smarts in children. America's education is maybe more accessible because of the language, but the quality of American education is subpar. Subpar, and nothing compared to the Netherlands, nothing compared to Europe, nothing compared to places like Singapore and stuff like that. I have nothing against them, but I also realize that when we compare in the Netherlands, our students who studied in the States compared to our students who studied in Europe, our students, they outperform them 10 to 1. I think, for me, I am a deep thinker. Yeah. I'm a writer. I am a really traditional academic. And the Dutch education system fosters for that type of academics. And that's why I thrive there. Okay. Because, writing papers and that's my thing.
You give me kind of a question to ask.
Sure.
Because I can remember growing up, it was more in the Dutch education system. And now we're switched to the
English system.
How do you feel about that?
Oh boy.
Sipping hot water.
I think that was the worst decision ever made for the children here. And I I don't see the children thriving as they should. Because I remember when that the late Nora Snake Gibbs, she was fiercely against that, and she got a lot of opposition. I talked to her many nights about that. And I remember the politicians' arguments were, when the children learn in their native language, which is a legitimate argument. Yeah. Learning in your native language does well. But that's not the problem why Statia's children don't thrive. Statia's children education problem is not a language problem. Statia's children education problem is because their parents don't invest the time and the facilities. And Stacia parents, I'm sorry, but you don't do right by your children. A lot of you don't. You're focused on material things. You're focused on traveling. You're focused on cruise. You're focused on buying the latest Jeeps and the latest cars. But you don't pay attention to your children. You don't read to your children. You don't instill the right learning practices to your children. And unfortunately, many of you can't learn yourselves. So if you cannot learn yourself, how can you teach your children? And it's not only my opinion. Look at the UNICEF reports on what Statia's children speak about their reality. Statia's problem is that we don't invest in our children. We don't, and we don't teach our children how to learn. And another thing, our community does not praise excellence. Instead, our community embraces ignorance and mediocrity. In Statia, we do not celebrate people going above and beyond. When you do, they always try to break you down and say, oh, you feel you're better than this, or you feel like this. We celebrate mediocrity here. Remember what I said about the brain? When we celebrate mediocrity, what does the brain do? It creates an environment where mediocrity is the norm. We don't. And that's why our children are not successful, because we don't instill a desire to succeed in them. Look at the sports. Have you noticed how many children in Statia are excelling in sports? Why? Have you ever asked yourself? Let me tell you why. Because we invest in sports. Mr. Merkman, Miguel, props to him. Yep. That's what we invest in. And what do you see? The children excel. And in Statia, something I've noticed, no disrespect to all the children who are going out to play baseball and basketball and all the things. I'm proud of them. But why is it that sports and music are so elevated in this community and intelligence is shunned? In Statia, if your child plays sports, you're awesome. But if your child is a nerd, so you are smart, yeah. We don't foster that. If we would put the same energy in fostering academics in our kids, we will see what will happen to them. Just take our sports, for example. It will work.
It's kind of true because if I talk from my own experience, I only started reading when I went to the Netherlands. And I felt then normal. Yeah. Because in Statia, if you go to somebody and say, yeah, well, I read this book here. Yeah. So true. It's only when I went up there is when I started really just, and I enjoy it. Yeah. But you're so afraid to, in the beginning I was so afraid to even say something about it. Because you're so feel like.
And did you remember?
Make you feel strange.
Do you remember that feeling that sometimes you didn't even know how to articulate what you wanted to say? Yeah, because you had a deficiency. Yeah. You started reading so late. You didn't learn a lot of things.
Exactly.
A lot of station children are like that. I've noticed, like students come to Holland. I talk to a lot of them sometimes. I notice there's a huge inability to even write a proper letter. They don't know how to do those things because here the learning is not, and also the children also feed it in themselves. They make fun of the ones who are smart or the ones who are studious. The community makes fun of people who are too studious. So people are afraid or ashamed, so you hold that into yourself.
Why do they do that?
Because people are afraid of that which is different. People embrace sameness. That's your natural thing. And what is different from you often causes fear, and fear causes you to close off. So the things that are the same, you're embracing that. That's okay. And oftentimes I realize too, I remember my mom used to say that as a parent, it often is daunting to realize that your child is more intelligent than you are. And I've seen that.
Yeah.
I've seen some kids that talk to their parents, and I'm like, he's putting you in a bind. And I try not to laugh.
Yeah.
And I've seen it, that when parents recognize their children are more intelligent than they are, they've become ashamed instead of allowing their children to teach them.
Oh. Yeah. I wanna switch gears just a little bit.
All right.
I know that there's a specific thing coming up where you're speaking. Before I go to that, you're also a therapist.
Yes.
Therapist or counselor, is it?
I'm a therapist. Yes, I'm a child and family therapist and a relationship therapist.
How did that specifically come about?
Well, I know.
Because what we know you is from science, right?
Yeah. That's why. So where did that come from?
Actually, therapy was my side hustle in college. I have an uncanny ability to make complex things very simple. And I tutored in college. And when my classmates couldn't study and I noticed they were stressed, I started asking, hey, what's going on? What's wrong with you? What's wrong? And then we would start talking. And then I would get, have you tried this? And have you tried that? And that was my side hustle. I made 50 euros here, 100 euros there from doing that. And then I realized, and people realized I was very good at it. And because when I went to college, I studied, I studied philosophy because I wanted to learn how to think. And then I studied pedagogy and psychology and sociology. And those three things, therapy is a natural thing.
Connects,
And in psychology, you learn how to speak. You have to learn communication skills and stuff like that. And then I also studied profiling, which is, a thing. I don't like to tell people that I can do that because, they always like, can you profile me?
Yeah. Although she started it when she was...
Stop it. But my career in therapy naturally evolved from my side hustle. Yeah. And because I was good at it, I am good at it. And so I did it. I do it. And not as much as before. But yeah, I did it. I loved it.
Where therapy is concerned, let's say there's a couple and they are going through specific issues. Should therapy be something that you do just on a regular basis, or because a lot of people just wait until something happens, then they go to a therapist?
That's a very good question. Thank you for asking that question, Jaquil. I think that every couple, before they embark on marriage, they should go to therapy. Therapy is not because something's wrong with you or because you need to fix. Of course, it is used to fix it. But here's the thing. You are two individual people. You have individual backgrounds, individual experiences, and you're bringing that together. The dynamic of putting that together is of itself a stressful thing. And we often say, we're in love, we're getting married, this and that. But here's simple. I've seen people's marriages blow up because he doesn't put down the toilet seat. You know what I mean? It's a cliche, but it is. I often tell people before you embark upon putting your life together, because before I got married, my then husband and I, we went to therapy. And I often see that Black people think therapy is a white people thing. And psychologists and psychotherapists are often shunned. I'm not crazy, and people laugh at you and think like that. And then if they do go, it's often a last minute thing. And you can't say, you can't save the situation. I think you should take therapy anytime it's necessary.
Yeah.
If you need a little picker-upper, and therapy sessions don't have to be all the time. You can schedule a free session. You can schedule a session or 6 sessions or 3 sessions. It doesn't have to be every day.
Yeah.
But if you feel that there's some area in your life or in your relationship that needs improvement, go.
Yeah.
Go and after. And if you love someone, if you genuinely love someone, and you have an instrument to make your connection better, wouldn't you take that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's my take on therapy.
You want to go?
No, so
I like
just to clarify, so you shouldn't wait until there's something wrong in therapy.
No, you shouldn't.
But
Because therapy is not only to fix problems. It's to help you understand processes in your life. And remember, you are bringing so much with you. Remember I said trauma is transgenerational? Yeah. You're bringing, if I would use my, okay, I won't say you're doing, but when I come to a relationship, I'm bringing my trauma, but I'm also bringing my mother's trauma, and my mother's trauma, and my father's trauma. And those things influence our lives sometimes, and we are not conscious of that, you know? And we bring those things. Like I told you, my mom had an issue with having people help her. Yeah. And she raised an independent child. Here's how that negatively influenced my relationship. I am overly independent in my relationships. And I haven't had that many, praise God. But one of the critique points of my former marriage is that my ex-husband, Lord, I need to remember the man is my ex-husband. My ex-husband often said, you don't need me, Jean-Marie.
Yeah.
You don't need me because you're too busy doing everything yourself. And sometimes when men walk up to me, it's not that I don't get attention. I get lots of attention. Yeah. But when I start to speak, you know, a man, today I went to the gin house. Yeah. And I was having a drink alone. Yeah. And a man came and he smiled at me and he looked at me and he offered to pay for my drink. What do you think was my reaction?
You got it.
I said, no, thank you. I can take care of myself. Yeah. And he looked at me. I was like, yeah, just offered to. Yeah. And so eventually I sat at the table and had a talk with this man. And he paid for my drink. Yeah. But I had to consciously tell myself, Jam, it's okay. Yeah. He could pay for your drink. Yeah. And I often tell men when they talk to me, I'm like, dude, let me tell you something. I don't need you. I got my own money. Yeah. I got my own house. Yeah. I got my own everything. Yeah. But a man's job is to provide, to protect, and to profess. When you take away a man's ability to provide by telling him, I could do it myself, your relationship is doomed. Mm-hmm. Because if a man cannot provide, he is not a man.
Mm-hmm. It's true.
Let him provide. That's his job. Let him protect and let him profess. Let him show you off. If you are in a relationship and your man is not showing you off, he does not love you. That relationship needs to end. Mm-hmm. Because when a man loves you, he shows you off to the world. If he's not doing that, he doesn't take you out, he doesn't post you, he doesn't hold your hand, he doesn't show you affection, he doesn't literally put you on a pedestal and say, that's mine, he does not love you. And your relationship needs to end.
Deep.
Wow. That is something to think and reflect on.
Yes.
But when it comes to you say you're often independent and you're also a deep thinker. Mm-hmm. How do you sometimes get out of Jean-Marie? Like,
oh boy. I wish I could say that that's easy for me. Mm-hmm. It's not. I don't escape Jean-Marie. I'm always her. She's always on. I have a tendency to not look at people. And some people think it's arrogance. It's not. When I look at people, I see things I don't want to see. So I stop looking. To retract myself, I often walk into a room and don't watch anything. I don't focus on anything. So I don't see people. And people often say to me, oh, I saw you and you turned your head. You didn't want to talk to me. That's not true. I did not see you because I programmed myself not to see you. Because if I engage, I cannot disengage. So for me to get out of myself, I don't focus. So there are days when I just don't speak to humans. I don't interact with humans.
Purposely.
And I'm also, what people don't know, I'm an introvert. I don't especially like people. I don't especially like to be around people. And if you really know me, you would know if you really see me and you want to see me happy, I'm by myself. When I'm alone, then I can unplug. But when I'm with people, no. So I'm always Jean-Marie, and I'm always a professor, always a thinker, always that, and it's not always to my benefit. Let's just say that.
Yeah. Let's say per se, like, I mean, like, in a sense of sometimes maybe, do you feel like sometimes people say you think too much, you may drive you crazy?
Yeah, people say that. Of course, people have had nervous breakdowns or mental breakdowns and stuff like that. But you can never think too much. And it's not the thinking that drives you crazy. It's actually the inexpression of what's inside you is what drives you crazy. So when you're thinking and you're talking and you're journaling and you're writing, you're actually avoiding going crazy. It's when you keep it inside, that's when you go crazy. People have a lot of crazy notions about people who are thinking. When you overthink, because I'm an overthinker, which is not a good thing at times, but overthinking can lead to mental breakdown. That, yes.
Yeah.
Because you can overanalyze a thing to a point of mental exhaustion.
Yes.
That is possible, yes. And I'm an overthinker. And so that's why you have to be very careful what you say to me. Because I can dissect a conversation, or not even a conversation. I can dissect one sentence to so many things. So you have to be careful how you speak.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I have to be careful how I listen to. Sometimes I just don't listen to stuff. I also, that's one of the things I tell people, don't feel offended. I often don't listen to people. Because when I pick up an idea, by the time you were at the end, I've already programmed your whole life. So, stuff like that.
You say you purposely don't see people, don't see things and so forth. In a station culture, I shouldn't say station. I mean, I'll put station to it. But in station, if someone sees you doing that, see you in a store or something, they say, but Jean-Marie, she didn't say anything to me.
I get that a lot. I get that a lot.
Sometime, we're sure.
Yeah,
oh.
people have. Yeah, I get that. You know something. One thing I've experienced here is that people have a lot of preconceived notions about who I am.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't like me because I'm straightforward. That's a lot of people say, "Oh, she's always negative." No, I'm not negative. I'm just honest, and people can't deal with honesty. People also have difficulty dealing with the facts that if I think that, I will tell you plain, that's what I think. If I think you're speaking complete nonsense, I will tell you you're speaking complete nonsense. So in the old people's tongue, I'm a plain bottle. People have issues with that. People also have issues because I'm very particular about who I let get close to me. But that is my prerogative. You cannot be everybody's friend. You cannot be everything to everyone. That's insane. But that's also detrimental to who you are. So I pick and choose who I let get close to me. I am never purposefully rude to people, but I often choose to not engage because some people, and I'm not, it's not station people, but just people in general.
In general,
some people are ignorant. Let's just
Yeah.
be honest. People behave ignorant, and I'm not going to engage in that. And another thing that I'm not going to do is I'm not going to apologize for who I am. You like me, okay. You don't like me, okay. But your opinion of who I am simply does not matter. So do not feel, because that's something that I've struggled with here in Statia specifically. People think that their opinion of you somehow matters. Like you're supposed to do something about them thinking this. I'm like, I like you. I respect you. This is what you think about me. Good for you.
Exactly.
But it doesn't matter because your opinion of me, with all due respect, does not matter. Yeah. People don't like that about me because I tell them your opinion does not matter.
Well, I like that you embody that because I was looking at a quote today, and it coincidentally it said, "It's funny that we love ourselves, the most. We love ourselves most, but when it comes to opinions, it's a different story."
Yeah, opinions are like buttholes. Everybody has them. Yeah, but what we do in small communities is that people think opinions are facts. So people tell you something and they expect that because that's their opinion, you have to run and change your whole life for that. I used to do that. I'm human. I've done that. It always leads to craziness. It always leads to not being your authentic self. I have a very good friend here, and one of the things that we have said for 2025 that we are doing is we are not letting people come into our space and direct that. We're not taking abuse. We and she says, one of my good friends here, and I'm sorry, I'm going to call your name so you could cuss me later. My dearest friend here is Chantel Richardson Chinese from Bakery.
Yeah.
And Shan and I, she is one of my, like I said, she's my dearest friend. And what she and I have said this year is we are not going to be hesitant about deleting, blocking, and removing people out of our lives, because people like to abuse you and then ask you, why are you crying? Why are you hurt? Why are you upset? And people cross your lines and expect you to take it. So Chantel and I have decided that we're not doing that. When you cross my line, we delete you. And we're not having a conversation about it. I'm not explaining to you, oh, you crossed my line. No, I'm getting up. And I'm not fussing, We're not enemies. I don't care if you eat. You have to eat. I want you to eat. You're just not eating at my table.
Yeah.
That's fine. So we need to learn to do that, because in a small community, people's opinions, I remember when I was growing up, people used to say, oh, she's from Dominica. You're never going to be this. You're never going to. If I used to listen to the opinions of people in Statia, I wouldn't be nobody.
Yeah.
So we don't do, I'm not doing that. People's opinions don't dictate my life anymore. It's a liberation when you get to that point.
That's right. It's
Wow.
true.
It is.
I want to talk about the introvert thing.
Yeah.
I read a book. One of the first books I read was a book by Susan Cain.
Okay.
Where it's a book named Quiet. In a world, you're living in a world where
Lots of noise.
extroversion is very much
appraised.
Yes.
Yeah, you have to be out there.
Yes.
Yeah.
On an island like Statia, being an introvert can be somewhat come off as, like you said, different situations
Proud,
where
cocky, arrogant.
Yeah.
Think you're better than people.
Yeah. And people also have the misconceptions that introverts shy, but
Or
it's
that
not
we're
really
stupid.
that.
Yeah. No.
But I feel like there's a lot of younger persons that are introverts but are trying to force themselves to change into something because it's the norm or what's rewarded on an island. What would you say to those particular persons?
I'm going to tell you something. Some of the most brilliant minds in the world are introverts. Because when you turn into yourself and you turn off the noise is when you hear best. To introverts, those people who love silence, grow in silence, become deep in silence. Silence is the place where you can rejuvenate your soul. It's the place where you find yourself, create yourself, heal yourself. Your silence is your gift to yourself. Don't let anybody take that away from you. Don't. My genius was developed in silence because it was in those days of crying and realizing that I didn't pass my subjects. When I pulled myself is where tough love came from. Being an introvert is not saying that that's who you are in every instance. It's just like your pattern, your preference. And just like if you like ice cream, you eat ice cream. If you're an introvert, you're an introvert. But to those people, I would say, be who you are. Because who mind don't matter. And who matter don't mind. Just be who you are. That's the best way to live. And especially in Statia where people push you to be, no. Yeah. Be quiet. And when you're quiet, you learn the best lessons.
Yeah.
It's 100% true.
Yeah.
I have one more question.
Okay.
As a therapist, you help a lot of people. Who or what at the end of the day helps you?
Who takes care of me?
Yeah.
I have a very small but extremely strong support system. I have two support systems. I have one support system that is filled with academics and therapists and psychotherapists and psychologists. So people who are much like me, we meet regularly and we talk about our life and the things. So that helps me. But my main source of support are, I say, my 3 Doten friends. There are 3 people that I can, and it's turned to 4 recently. I need to remember that. There are 4 people who I can wake up any hour of the day or night and say, I am not okay. What helps me is that I have a safe space where I can say, I need to cry. I'm not okay. And I have those people who often recognize before I do that I'm not okay, and who call me up and be like, hey, shut up. Come over here. JM, that's enough now. Take care of yourself. You always need that support system. So they take care of me. Yeah, my 4 Doten friends.
Although you said that was your last question, I have a question for you before we end this. So this podcast is about, sharing different stories from different walks of life on persons relating to Statia or even persons migrating to here. We inside see it our way. You as an outsider living in the Netherlands, even though I know you're updated with what's going on in Statia, for sure. Yeah. What do you think is missing, or what do you see Statia can actually work on?
First, Statia lacks strong, transparent, and consistent leadership. Statia lacks leadership across the board. No disrespect to the people who are leading, but Statia doesn't really have any leaders. And that lack of strong, transparent, and consistent leadership is what keeps our island down. There's too much emotion in the decision-making process of our country.
Can you elaborate on that?
I'll give a small example. Lord Jesus, they're going to crucify me. For example, Statia have a lot of single men, a lot of men who are, We used to have what they call a house of ill repute, a whore house, a place where men can go. why is our whorehouse closed? Why isn't a permit being given to open a whorehouse? Now, let me continue on this because I know they want to crucify me. So let me be very clear on this. What do you prefer? Your men having a place, a safe space, where they can go and deal with their biological, physical needs because sex is vital to a man's existence. We women, we can do without. We got other things. We're built other ways. When we close it off psychologically, we could live for years. A man will literally die if he doesn't have sex regularly. It can happen. Why? What would you prefer? A man where he can have a safe space for those kind of things? Or would you rather them being sexually frustrated, touching your little girls, or bothering your wives and your girlfriends? That's a small example of where I would say strong and consistent leadership would tell Stacia as a community, yes, there are a lot of Christian people here. Yeah. Yes, Christianity rules the community, but Stacia is not a Christian state. Stacia is a secular state, which means church and state are separated. Why don't we have a whorehouse where our men can go? That's an example of what I mean. Strong, transparent, consistent leadership, free of emotion. Yeah. Another thing, when it comes to strong, consistent leadership, why is it that we often take a back seat in decisions that are pertaining to our island? And when I say a back seat, well, we say, oh, the Dutch doing this, the Dutch doing that. But let me talk about something that I've learned about being in the Netherlands and working with Dutch people. Dutch people are master negotiators. Mm-hmm. They close deals because they are willing to compromise. They close deals because they do their homework excessively before they come to the table. Why don't we do our homework excessively when we come to our table? And why don't we put forth our best negotiators when we are negotiating with other people? We often tend to choose people who we like or people who've always been here. And the hierarchy, because I often say Stacia is much like India. You know, India is ruled by this system of hierarchy. In Stacia, I often find that decisions are made on people's surnames or people who they're from. You know, if you're a Woodley or a Spanner, a Schmidt or a Brown or a Pont, you know, if you're a Pompier or a Coutard, as they like to try to say their name, that influences who you are. Stacia is too much based on who you are instead of what you can do. We make too many decisions because this person is our family, this person is our friend, when this person is not necessarily the best person for the job. Yeah. We are too biased in this place. So we need to fix that. So leadership. Second thing, our education system needs innovation. We need to introduce more of the world into our education system. And when I say more of the world, I mean our children need to learn subjects like philosophy. Children need to have debating clubs. Mm-hmm. Children need to have writing classes. Children need to have places where they can expand their cognitive range, not only their sports and music and stuff like that. Stacia needs to foster deep and critical thinkers because those are the people that change the world. We don't do that enough. And the third thing is our community needs to stop living in pretense. We pretend too much in this place. We are unhappy, yet we remain in these unhappy relationships. We are unhappy, yet we stay in these jobs. Mm-hmm. We don't want to be married to this person. We actually don't even like them, but we stay with them because what would people say? Mm-hmm. We pretend to be who we are not, because in Stacia, we love to live in fairy tales. That is a fundamental thing that keeps our community. We compete on things that make absolutely no sense. Who cares about the size of your Jeep when your children are lacking attention? Who cares that you're building a huge house in a big lot, and 5 years after it's built, it looks like a pigsty because you don't clean it, you don't upkeep it? Who cares about you're going on a cruise and you can shop at Shein and Supernova and all those things? You have the nicest of things. That's nice. But what do you have inside that actually matters? Stacia needs to foster content, true content, intelligence, spirituality, psychology, mindfulness, health, instead of all these stupid material things that are killing us. And at the end of the day, when you die, try taking your huge house with you. See what happens. Those are the three things I think we need to improve on.
Yeah. Do you have any advice before we close this?
Advice to our community?
Yeah.
Stop punishing people for the choices that they make. You may not agree with how people choose to live their lives, but stop punishing them for the choices that they make. Recognize that if we continue to embrace ignorance and mediocrity in the way that we do, we will have no future. Let us give ourselves a chance. Give Stacia a real chance by allowing things that may be far from your bed, far from your comfort zone, but help. And you know something? Please allow children to be children. Stop sexualizing your children. Clothe your children properly. Too many of these little children are wearing clothes that they shouldn't be wearing. And the next thing, why are young children out late at night? Let us please put our children to bed at hours that they should sleep. Young children, before, let's say from 0 to 16, should be getting at least 11 to 12 hours of sleep at night. Please take your children off the street and put them to bed. And put them to bed, because here's the last thing I want to teach Stacia. Do you know where you grow? When you grow? When you learn best? When your brain processes best? When you are asleep.
Thank you so much.
Very
Thank you.
They're going to crucify me, I'm telling you. But I'm ready for that.
We had a very good conversation. I very much appreciated that you took the time to come out to speak to us.
I loved it. Thank you so much for having me.
You never know, in the future we might have a part 2.
I would love to come on again.
Yeah.
Like I say here on The Talk, Jackie the Imagery, capture the moment, watch it forever. See you guys in the next episode. Bless.